morning, everybody, and today I'm going to be presenting to you my AP research project on dream, sleep, and stress. So this is my research question here, and it states, what is the correlation between stress levels and the length of a dream, and how do factors such as sleep quality and everyday stress affect this relationship? So how did I get to this question? I've always had a passion for psychology and specifically how the mind works, and the entire study of psychology helps people understand what goes on in their mind, leading to the topic of mental health. Mental health, as defined by the World Health Organization, is a state of well-being that allows people to cope with the stresses of life. From the topic of mental health, it led me to precursors to mental disorders and what are the first signs of a person's mental health degrading. This image taken from a website showing the effects of mental disorders shows exactly what I'm interested in. In this second picture specifically, it shows like the brain slowly degrading compared to this third one where it's already degraded due to the mental illness. These are images from articles from the American Psychological Association, National Library of Medicine, and the University of Minnesota Medical School. And these are only few of many examples. These articles almost all had two key themes when talking about mental disorders: stress and sleep. Some even incorporated dreams while talking about sleep. No article, website, or online book had all three themes of stress, dreams, and sleep mentioned together when discussing the precursors to mental health disorders. It brought me to think about what stress and sleep have to do with one another and how other outside factors can affect this relationship. From looking at this question, we can understand what some of the precursors to mental disorders have to do with one another. So what are we talking about, and what is the surrounding literature for this topic? In an experiment done by researchers specializing in the field of psychology, Kusuma Harawati and Devi Gayatri, they state that students with poor sleep quality are 4.7 times more likely to have higher stress than students with good sleep. This shows how stress and sleep quality are a cycle, with one affecting the other. Because these two factors are a cycle, it's important to have a base understanding of both. Eric Sooney, a psychologist writing articles, he states that the average person typically goes through 4 sleep cycles. And if the normal amount of sleep cycles for a person is not reached, then their mood will be negatively affected the next day. Sleeping is a big part of our life, and many people do it autonomously. What people do not realize is sleep is the reason we wake up the next day and the reason we are happy. Dr. Abhinav Singh, a sleep medicine physician, he talks about the 4 stages of sleep. This will be important to the understanding of the study's findings. N1 is the first stage of non-rapid eye movement sleep, also known as NREM sleep. This is when the person initially falls asleep. N2, the second stage of NREM sleep. It takes up half of the sleep cycle's time. N3, the last stage of NREM sleep is when the person is fully asleep. The last stage is rapid eye movement sleep, also known as REM sleep. This is when brain activity picks up to similar levels as when you are awake. This is also where dreams exist, and with each cycle, the dream becomes longer. Yvette Graveline, a graduate in the psychology department of the University of British Columbia, she states that while the brain is processing information throughout the day, the mind is playing a movie known as dreams. People must go through multiple REM cycles during sleep because the brain needs to process so much information about what happened during the day. What is the conclusion from the surrounding literature? It is hypothesized that low stress levels and high quality sleep lead to longer dreams compared to high stress levels and low quality sleep, which would lead to shorter dreams. Now we will explore the method for the study I conducted. There were 2 parts to this method. The first was a stress journal where participants recorded their daily stress over 7 days, and this is the qualitative part. The second was a survey where the same participants answered questions, and this is the quantitative part, yes and no questions. there are 10 participants, and all of them were students from my classes. This is the stress journal, the first part, and it was taken for 7 days along with the stress and dream survey. Shown in the picture is 1 day of the stress journal. The scale for these stress levels, as you see here, are level 1, little to no stress felt during the day. Level 2, some stress is felt, but it does not have any impact on the course of your day. Level 3, you felt stress, you felt it around half the day due to normal and daily activities. Level 4, you really felt stressed, and there was a time in the day where you had to take a break to stop what you were doing and recuperate so that you could move on to your daily activities. Level 5, you really noticed you were stressed, and throughout the day you had to take frequent breaks to recuperate and gather yourself before moving on. At the end of the day, you still had stress from what happened throughout the day. The participant would have to write their stress level and if they had any reasons for stress. This form was the second part and it's called the Sleep and Dream Survey. It was sent out to all the participants of the study, and all questions are answered the next day after sleeping. All participants were asked these 5 questions. The first question was how many hours, or was whether this was a normal week, and it would account for any anomalies in their sleep schedules or stress levels. The next questions were asking for hours of sleep, stress from the previous day, and if they had a continuous sleep. These were meant to provide a basis for the next few questions about dreams. The last question asked if they had a dream, and it will lead the participant to another section in the survey only if they had a dream the previous night. These next 2 questions asked if the participants remembered having a dream, specifically a nightmare, and if their dream was random or if it was related to the stress that they had throughout the day. These questions pose the effect of stress from the day and the sleep quality that they had. Since there is different data for each day, at the end of collection, the data is more specific because it was taken over 7 days. So what are the findings from the stress journal? Stress levels were mainly from 2 to 3 because the overall average of stress is 2.87 and the standard deviation of stress is 0.27. This means that 95% of participants fall under the range of 2 to 3. And these stress levels from 2 to 3 are normal stress from daily activities and aren't really anomalies. From this table, it can be seen that over the course of 7 days, the average hours of sleep seems to increase. However, the percent of participants who had continuous sleep seems to fluctuate. And this is because participants have different thresholds for what their normal sleep looks like. And most participants did have a continuous sleep, but those who did not will definitely have an impact on the dream portion of the data. From this table, it can be seen that on average, approximately 61% of the participants still had stress from the previous day over the course of 7 days. The table also shows that the percentage of participants who had a dream was 40%. And the percent of participants who had a dream, specifically a nightmare, started around 0, but you can see that it increased as the week went on. It also seems that 30 to 40% of the participants who had a dream had their dream relate to stress from the previous day. Now, what does this all mean? We're going to analyze that here. Participants were only had 4 to 6 hours of sleep during the first couple of days. This is significantly less than what the Centers for Disease Control and Protection recommends. If a person interrupts or does not get enough sleep, they will be exhausted the next day and not perform to their full potential. The participants in this study were found to have an average stress level of 2.87, which means they exhibited a normal amount of stress throughout the day. The lack of sleep combined with a normal amount of stress can lead to circumstances people would not even dream about, such as stress dreams. Rachel Goldman, a licensed psychologist, states that stress dreams are intense dreams caused by stress, which can lead to increased anxiety the next day. From analyzing both daily stress and our average hours of sleep from the study, it can be seen that it may lead to stress dreams and even increased anxiety the next day. And this fact remains true because 61% of participants still have stress the next day. Sleep quality plus daily stress leads to a person's dreams being more vivid and can even lead to an increase in stress the next day. As mentioned before, the percent of participants with the nightmare increased throughout the week, going from 0 to a high of 80%, which is a positive correlation between amount of nightmares and stress. This shows that the dreams became more intense and distressing to the participants because they still carried stress from the previous day. Participants did not have continuous sleep throughout the entire week. This is shown by the fluctuating percentages of participants who had continuous sleep. This also means that their sleep cycles were either interrupted or cut short. For example, on days 1 and 2, more participants did not have continuous sleep, therefore only 30% and 10% of participants had a dream. On the other hand, on days 3 and 6, where participants had a more continuous sleep, there were higher percentages of participants who had a dream. It seems from the data in the tables that few interruptions while sleeping leads to more time in the REM stage of sleep. This leads to longer dreams, which the participants remember because they spent more time in that stage. So results do show that the correlation between stress and length of a dream may be affected by sleep quality and daily stress, which are precursors to mental illnesses. So why does this all matter? By conducting a study to relate stress to the REM stage of sleep, specifically dreams, it appears that higher stress levels shorten the amount of time a person spends in REM sleep because stress levels already lead to less sleep. Cleveland Clinic states that REM sleep makes up about 25% of sleeping time, and as each cycle goes on, the amount of time you spend in that stage increases. This proves how more time spent sleeping without interruptions will lead to more time spent in the REM stage. Dr. Abhinav Singh states that the brain processes emotions, memories, and plays dreams during REM sleep. Staying awake longer or interrupting sleep can lead to shorter dreams. And the brain would not be able to process anything since it would be preoccupied with maintaining hormone levels and other bodily functions. While dreaming, stress is more severe because it can induce anxiety the next day. Stress and a lack of sleep are a cycle, affecting one another. Each needs to be controlled for a person to live peacefully. Coming back to the picture from the beginning over here, we can understand the importance of understanding these precursors and their relationship. So it would be better to treat mental illnesses like insomnia and depression at an earlier stage than let it develop into something even more severe. Some limitations of this study were that there were only 10 students. This is a smaller sample size than it needs to be approximately normal according to the central limit theorem. I also would need to include adults in this study for it to be generalizable to the entire population rather than just students. Also, because there were 2 variables in this study, they both would need to be isolated in order to truly see the effect they have on one another. Since this data is collected over a whole week, it is hard to make sure the participants actually do both parts each day and do not write on the last day, leading to response bias, which can skew the data. For future research, it is recommended that a more accurate study be conducted so the results are able to be used and applied to the entire population. This should also be more controlled to see what the correlation between sleep and stress is on dreamland. Therefore, we would need more groups for one variable. We would need 3 groups for each variable to affect the subject during the study. Thank you all, and that is it.
Okay, we have a few questions. The first one is, what was one obstacle or challenge you encountered while implementing your research method, and how did you address it?
So one obstacle accounting my research and method was the small sample size. However, because I had a small sample size, that meant that I could use more information from each person. and therefore I used an entire week rather than just a day or two. This allowed me to get 7 times more data from each participant.
Thank you.
What additional questions emerged during your research? Based upon your recent experience, what advice would you give the other researchers who might choose to investigate those questions?
So the questions that arise through my research are, what do these precursors have to do with each other of mental illnesses, right? And so as I was looking through it, I would advise other researchers to actually implement their study in a way that it isolates every single variable of the precursor, and then at the end they could do some combined study in order to see like the combined effect that they have, because most of these precursors happen together and not one at a time.
All right. Think about the initial curiosity that led to your inquiry. What other areas of inquiry might the same curiosity lead to?
So I had a curiosity in the psychology field, and the other areas of psychology that the inquiry could lead to is mental illnesses, and specifically the after effect of them. Like, having the mental illness is one part, but there's so much information on having it, but not what happens after, and what happens after a person actually resolves it within themselves.
Any other questions from the panelists?
Mm-mm.
Any questions from the audience?
Okay, a hand for Rishi.